And we got another big day here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Of course, those comments and questions are welcome there in the chat. We'll be here for the next couple hours talking college football with you in a jam-packed schedule. Number one player in the nation, Jackson Cantwell, is expected to make his decision, or maybe he has here in the last couple minutes. Number one offensive tackle, number one player in the country. We'll have Leanne Herring stopping by a little bit later to break that down for us. But we're going to lead off the show with our buddy Brad Crawford stopping by from 247 Sports and CBS. Brad, it's been quite a long time since we talked, so it's great to see you here.
Yeah, good to see you again, Mark. Looking forward to 2025 season, and the dog days of summer are here, but fall camp and media days and all that will be here before you know it.
No doubt about that. And you, like me, are working hard talking college football, regardless of what the calendar says. So I noticed that you just posted a top 50 quarterbacks for 2025. So that's a nice deep dive. So we want to encourage everyone to head on over to 247 Sports, or maybe the best way to do it is just follow Brad on Twitter, of course. You see his handle right there. And so without giving too much away here, few things that hit me about the quarterback landscape, Brad, would be number one, I think there's been a bit of a dip. We went through a time period not too long ago when Joe Burrow was on the field and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Justin Fields, and we could go on, Caleb Williams and Michael Penix just a couple seasons ago, where we always had maybe 4 or 5 guys that we could point to as elite. Are you seeing that kind of elite depth now?
I think it depends, Mark, if some of these top 5 to top 10 guys actually turn out to be elite this season. A lot of these guys are relative first-year starters. Arch Manning is the Heisman front-runner. He's 1 or 2 in most lists. Garrett Nussmeier, guy at LSU who has looked great in spots, but there have been times where he has turned it over a bunch and, has really struggled finding his receivers, especially on third down. But Nussmeier is a guy that I'm very high on this offseason. You look at a guy like Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. Is he going to be able to replicate what he did during the second half of his redshirt freshman season as a sophomore without a bevy of talent at wide receiver? Who knows? So there's a lot of big ifs. I'm kind of with you. I mean, there's one guy in this list, Caden Salter. He was a top 10 quarterback nationally heading into Liberty last season, and now he's outside the top 25 at Colorado. So very interesting list. And it was certainly hard to pick 50 out of the 127 or so quarterbacks.
So, Brad, when you make this kind of list, do you strictly say, hey, this is what I saw in 2024. These are the stats. This is what my eyeballs tell me, and I'm not going to try to make any kind of projection on who's going to make a leap or not? Or do you, kind of like I've done in the past, and people have criticized me and said, you don't know what Bryce Young's going to do? And I've said, you know what? Nick Saban tells me he's the starter before they hit spring practice. That's good enough for me. Shoot, he's one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the nation, even though he's only thrown about 5 or 6 passes. Do you make a projection out of it, or do you tend to just rely on what the track record's been?
No, it's largely projection and predictive. I mean, I've never seen Julian Sayin throw a pass in a game at Ohio State, yet I have him as a top 15 player at the quarterback spot. I mean, when you have a guy like Jeremiah Smith you're throwing to and Carnell Tate and some of those guys, you're going to put up crazy numbers in Ryan Day's offense. Same thing goes for Dante Moore at Oregon. Do we really know, is he the next Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel? No, we really don't. But Will Stein's offense at Allison Stadium, man, just produces big numbers. So there's a lot of guys where respect to their coaching staffs and the talent around them, maybe they're a little bit higher rated than they should be based on what we've seen on the field so far.
Got Brad Crawford on the line breaking things down for us. You can join Brad at 247 Sports and also CBS Sports. So you got the Twitter handle right in front of you. Brad, maybe we put, when I ask this question, I'll preface it by saying maybe we put the whole Bill Belichick fiasco with his girlfriend aside, because that's for a lot of people more interesting than anything. But maybe we'll keep it to football and say, for you, what's been the most interesting offseason to follow in regards to a player, a coach, a program, anything in particular for you?
Outside of LSU signing the top-rated portal class, man, I'm all in on LSU being a not only a playoff contender, but a national title frontrunner, one of those 3 or 4 teams, along with Texas, along with Oregon, Ohio State, that really has a chance to win it all. I know Brian Kelly hasn't done that yet at LSU, has yet to make the playoff in Baton Rouge, but this is the season that happens. That's a big storyline for me based on who they've signed. And the fact that Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill has not signed the portal class that I thought he would. I mean, a lot of when he took the job in November was, there's $15 million earmarked to UNC football. Where are these big signings and recruiting of the portal so far? First 6 months on the job, Mark, we haven't seen it. Their best defensive player, Bo Atkinson, he hopped ship in the spring, and now he's at Ohio State, probably going to start for the Buckeyes. Their starting quarterback at UNC is probably going to be Gio Lopez from South Alabama, a guy that nobody had heard of up until 4 or 5 weeks ago. So very interesting offseason at Chapel Hill despite hiring a 7-time Super Bowl champion.
Kind of along the same lines, Brad, I'll let you in on a stat that I like to track from season to season. And I came across this, 7 or 8 years ago when I was going through preseason publications. All the great publications out there do a fine job, Street and Smith, Athlons, all down the line. However, I started looking at these year after year thinking, and of course, we've all looked at them since we were 8 or 10 years old, but it started to hit me. Are they pretty much predicting the same thing that happened last year and maybe making a game tweak here and a game tweak there, so forth and so on, and thinking, especially at that point, it was, you could just throw Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama and maybe tack on Oklahoma and just throw them in the top 5 in some order. And you probably were going to be pretty safe. But what I started to look at, Brad, was I thought, how much does college football change from season to season? So I picked the number 3, and I thought, that's a significant change to me. It's just an arbitrary number, but if you're 6-6, you go to 9-3 or 3-9, that's pretty significant to me. So I started to track how many teams had that much of a significant move positively or negatively from season to season, because I tracked these magazines and they would have almost no one, unless it was a Colorado situation. Deion took over. They can't be 1-11 the next year. Those kind of situations, other than outside of 3 or 4 teams, they'd run it very conservative. Everybody's staying within about 1 game from the previous season. I started tracking this 7 or 8 years ago. 29 out of 70 last year, Brad, in the Power 5, if you include Washington State and Oregon State being Power Conference teams. So 29 teams had that drastic of a move, and it's usually in the 20 to 25 range. So my long-winded question to you would be, who are those possible candidates out there to make a big move?
Yeah, and we're going to see that more and more, Mark, as the transfer portal era spreads. I mean, look at Barry Odom in Purdue, 53 transfers taken. That's more than even Deion Sanders has taken his first couple cycles at Colorado. We're seeing first-year coaches especially completely overhaul rosters where you can't look at a 2-10 Purdue and expect the same in 2025, maybe 4-8, something like that. But getting back to your question, as far as teams that will make a jump, I think Auburn and Oklahoma are 2 teams from the SEC. One of those 2 teams with a losing record last year is bound to get into that 8 or 9 win range based on what they did in the portal. Auburn and Oklahoma both earmarked a bunch of millions of dollars in resources in NIL to perfect these rosters. We saw Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold. Now he's Hugh Freeze's guy on the Plains. They signed Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, top-rated receiver. And then Oklahoma gets John Mateer from Washington State. I know you're familiar with him. And then Jade Knott this spring from Cal, who had 1,300 yards rushing 2 seasons ago as a sophomore. So Brent Venables and Hugh Freeze, 2 coaches on the hot seat. And what that means normally in the SEC, Mark, is those guys retain their jobs by coaching and, pushing these rosters to an elite level. And I think Auburn and Oklahoma have that now. That being said, they both face treacherous schedules. Oklahoma right now is power rated as my number 1 toughest schedule in college football.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because I produced a video at this time last year, probably more like August, because it finally hit me. I thought, my goodness, look at Texas, look at Oklahoma, look how they're entering the SEC. Let's check this out. And as you well know, because you just did the breakdown, and just, again, another great thing to check out that Brad runs down to these schedules. But Oklahoma was playing teams in the SEC that had won 35% of their games the year before, and Texas is playing teams that won, or the other way around. Oklahoma is playing teams that won 65% of their games from the previous season, and then Texas 35%. And then if we look back on the way the schedule played out, it pretty much played to the projection. And now they're going to have to do it all over again because obviously everyone in the SEC plays the same schedule, just home and road gets swapped.
Texas got a yellow brick road during his first season in the SEC. Part of the reason why they made it to Atlanta. Now, that being said, Steve Sarkisian has made it to consecutive playoff semifinal appearances. He's been a touchdown away from making the championship game, man, back-to-back years. So Texas is certainly one of my preseason front runners, and I'm confident Arch Manning is going to be as good, if not better, than Quinn Ewers.
Brad Crawford joins us from 247 Sports and CBS Sports as well. And Brad, one of my favorite off-season projects has always been comparing the conferences, even though it's been very futile because we don't need to break down the numbers for like the last 20 years. The SEC is the best conference, but I still would go through the math and not just say, okay, they went 15-8 against the other conferences and they went 9-15, so they got to be better. No, I'd go through a lot of seedings processes and compare the scores and so forth. But finally, here in like the last 2 years, we actually have a debate that's legitimate for the first time ever. So where do you stand on the SEC against the Big Ten?
Oh, I think the Big Ten right now is the top conference in college football. I mean, you can't say otherwise because not only did the Big Ten win the last year of the 14 playoff by beating Nick Saban in his final game in the Rose Bowl and then dismantling Washington, Jim Harbaugh, that was at Michigan. But last year, Ohio State waxed a pretty good 10-win Tennessee team, beat the SEC runner-up Texas in the semifinal, and then destroyed Notre Dame in that last game and won the expanded playoff. So back-to-back titles for the Big Ten. First time that's happened in a long time. You mentioned the SEC's 2 decades of dominance, certainly as long as I've been in college football reporting. But I think right now, heading into 2025, out of the top 10, there's probably 8 to 9 teams from the SEC and Big Ten combined. And, I mean, right now the Big Ten has the throne. And the SEC always bragged about that during the BCS era, in the early playoff era when Bama, LSU, those teams were winning now championships. So right now, Michigan and Ohio State, the title goes through Columbus.
Jackson, we appreciate your kind words for Brad and myself on the Super Chat. Thank you for that. We'll read that in just a second. Basically saying, to-do list, tell Paul Feinbaum about Brad Crawford and Mark Rogers making magic at 3 p.m. Eastern, or that must be Central Time for you, Jackson, I guess. Tell Paul to get Mark Rogers on the Paul Feinbaum Show, and tell Publix about the voice of college football. Tell Publix about the magic Brad brings. Well, thank you for that, Jackson.
Appreciate it, man. Checks in the mail, Jackson.
Absolutely. There you go. Do you like the proposed college football playoff format? Okay, the one line item is, of course, 16 teams. Then the next line item is the forced entry of 4 from the Big Ten and 4 from the SEC, and on down the line, 2, 2, 1, 1, 3, and so forth. Where do you stand on this whole business?
Yeah, if I was a fan of a Group of 5 program, Mark, I'm pretty much packing up shop and turning my television off and leaving college football fandom. But the good news is I cover Power 4, and I think it's still very healthy for the sport. I mean, SEC and Big Ten right now, they dominate college football landscape. Of course, half or more every year of the playoff 16-team field would be from those 2 leagues. I think it's funny, the report came out talking about 3 at-large selections in addition to all these auto bids and conference champions. There's really only 2 at-large selections. Notre Dame has a golden ticket to be in the playoff every year as long as the Irish win 10 games. And with that schedule, even though I know the future schedule includes Clemson for 10 or 12 straight years, but Notre Dame's going to be there under Marcus Freeman. They recruit at an elite level. They have the money to spend that a lot of programs just outside the top 10 or so do not have. So Notre Dame's going to be there, but I'm looking forward to expansion. I think the number one issue right now for me in the expanded playoff is we have to get the seeding right. Last year, 3 of the top 4 seeds lost their first game. And I was at the Rose Bowl, Mark, and I saw Ohio State just obliterate a very good Oregon team that I thought was probably the second best team in college football at season's end. despite Penn State and Notre Dame playing well late. But Dan Lanning did not make excuses out there in Pasadena. But, man, what a raw deal that was for the 13-0 Big Ten champion Ducks. Yeah, your first-round games against Ohio State. That's brutal, man.
And it very much had an NFL feel to it in that, okay, we're playing a weekend of playoff games, then we're playing the next weekend pretty much. That by the end of the season, I was bringing up Oregon as an argument for the second best team in the country. People were like laughing, like they completely had forgotten everything that had happened because it seemed like forever ago that Oregon did anything positive. And obviously the lasting memory was them getting whacked at the Rose Bowl. So certainly they couldn't be the second best team. So it just has this NFL playoff feel to it. So much more than it used to.
It's correct. And this offseason, I mean, the hype surrounding Penn State right now, I know it's Ohio State and I know it's Oregon heavy, Michigan with Bryce Underwood, top player in the country. But Penn State, this is the best roster that this program's had, certainly under James Franklin, probably in the last 25 years or so, back when Penn State was relevant with LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown and those kind of all-American pass rushers. But this Penn State team is going to be great. The toughest game in the regular season is against Ohio State. It doesn't matter for James Franklin. He's probably going to have to play Ohio State at least twice this season if Penn State's as good as we all expect. But Drew Aller back, Katron Allen, Singleton, they picked up 2 new wide receivers in the portal that they had to have. So I'm a big fan of Penn State this offseason, and I can see why, fans around Pennsylvania and Happy Valley are extremely excited about this 2025 season.
Hey, Brad, before we let you go, I mentioned the NFL, and there are so many comparisons being made now between college football and the NFL. So the NFL has seemed to gotten everything right for decades at this point, generations. It seems like everything they do turns to gold. And right now they've got a situation where they've extended the season. They've played regular season games opposite college football playoff games in the first round last year. And everything seems to, and they seem to have the perfect mix in the NFL of keeping off-season interest. They've got a big schedule release that I think is the most overrated thing in sports. We know if you know the NFL formula scheduling, you know who they're going to play. It's just a big deal that they're going to play them on Thursday night, I guess. And then the mix between roster retainment and stability and free agency seems to be perfect, where the typical NFL fan is pretty comfortable with, I'm going to keep my team. But there's a few guys that might leave, and we've got a chance to get a few guys, but it's not this total upheaval where anybody can walk out at any time. And so college football is obviously off the rails when it comes to that. So do you sense an angst among college football fans or a disinterest in many college football fans because of the instability?
I mean, to be honest with you, Mark, there's only 8 to 10 programs annually every summer who can actually win multiple expanded playoff games, have the depth to do it and the talent to do it, and eventually win a national championship. Yet we're going to, tout 25 to 30 teams every offseason that really have a shot at this when there's only half a dozen or so that actually do based on spending. I mean, right now, Texas and Ohio State are just lapping the competition nationally in terms of resources and NIL. That rumored report that Texas is spending $40 million on this year's roster. If it's anywhere close to that, that's double than what Ohio State spent last season. And that was one of the wealthiest, prettiest looking rosters in college football history with Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith, Will Howard, both those running backs, a bunch of guys on defense. So for me, if you're, a fan of a program that has an occasional 8-4, 9-3 type season, yes, there's reason to be excited, but with no salary cap in college football, the haves and the have-nots are still going to slowly widen in this new era. And, before we change transfer portal stipulations and impose, salary cap and NIL restrictions, I think it's a long way from changing. I mean, Nick Saban quit the game 2 years ago because he couldn't sign 15 5-stars a class anymore. I know he actually never did that, but he could not handpick the guys he wanted because the Oregons, the Tennessees now had just as much money as Bama going after these same talent. So it's always about the Jimmies and Joes, but unfortunately for most of college football, there's only 8 to 10 schools each year that get those blue chip level athletes.
Great insight from Brad Crawford. Excellent writer, great guy, and you can catch him on a daily basis there at 247 Sports. Brad, great to catch up with you. Thanks for coming on.
Mark, good to see you, man. Anytime during the season sounds good to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. All right, really good stuff from Brad Crawford. Again, you can catch him at 247 Sports. We got a jam-packed show today. We've got Nathan Brown from College Football Mafia coming on the show here in about 10 minutes. We also have Kevin McGuffey stopping by from Last Word on College Football and Leanne Herring at the end of the show to break down the latest in recruiting. And we're expecting a big one coming down the line with Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 player in the nation. He may have already even committed at this point. The announcement was supposed to be at 3:45 Eastern time. Of course, we want to see your comments and questions. Jackson, again, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate you. Mike 3883, you know I'm going to catch you on this one. If you're slightly wrong on this one, I get your point that BK took a Heisman quarterback to 5 losses. Actually, 3 losses to be exact. So, yeah, Jaden Daniels, highest flying offense in the nation with Brian Kelly and a poor defense, 10-3. And we see how good Jaden Daniels is, of course, at the next level, leading his team to an NFC championship game. As a rookie, Mike 3883, I agree. Clemson's schedule is sneaky tough. Good to see Minnie here. Yes, she believes that the Big Ten is the crown, is the best conference. I wasn't going to push back on Brad, but although I'm considered a Big Ten guy by most, the SEC is still the best conference. Depending on how you want to approach your rankings. If you're going with the elite, if you're going with the top, then the Big Ten has a definite argument and the advantage of winning 2 consecutive national championships, of course. If you're looking at the depth of the conference, then you got to go with the SEC. They just played better top to bottom. It's really not even, it's debatable, but it's not super close. Off the top of my head, the SEC 19-13 against the other conferences, and the Big Ten went 13-13, and they can pretty much tip their cap to Ohio State for cleaning off 4 straight excellent opponents. Of course, 3 outside the Big Ten to win the national championship. Mike, I am right there with you. The targeting rule is, I think it's been tweaked in certain ways that has actually improved what the original rule was. It's still not good enough. And I have more issue with the penalty, not necessarily the rule, but how it's enforced. It's the only rule in football, certainly, and I believe in sports, it's the only rule in sports that the severity of the rule depends on when you committed the foul. That doesn't make any sense. If you commit the foul at the end of the first half, then you sit out the second half and then you're back for the next game. Well, if you commit the foul a couple plays later, after halftime at the beginning of the third quarter, then you got to sit out the rest of the game, then the first half of the next game. If you're going to base a penalty and you're going to force a player to leave the field, which I don't agree with, that first and foremost, then you need to be consistent. And it needs to be based on the number of plays or the number of series or something that's more fair. How that wasn't detected when they enforced the rule and when they first came up with the enforcement of the rule and the implementation of the penalty, I don't know how that wasn't seen at the time. Yes. When I do hire a designer, Minnie, she or he better do much better than this. I would not have paid for this. I almost took money from myself after I did that. Mike, good to see you. Roy, I'm not aware of the Jackson Cantwell decision yet. That was supposed to be at 3:45 Eastern. I'm assuming there was a lot of delay and hoopla as is usual. Mike, Penn State gets Oregon and UCLA. That'll be difficult. Why are we throwing UCLA into that mix? Oh, Dave, you had to go there. And I guess I had to throw it on the screen. All right. I got you, Mike. I'll go along with that. UCLA beat Nebraska and Iowa last year. They could beat Penn State possibly at home. Wouldn't hold my breath on that one, but that's a thought. All right. We are going to keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. You've joined us for the College Football Show. And we come your way Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And the only time we don't is when we do a late night call-in show. So we're going to do that on Wednesday. So no 4 p.m. on Wednesday. You'll see Leanne Herring and myself at 8:30 Eastern on Wednesday night with the recruiting show. And we will also take your calls. We keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football with our buddy Nathan Brown checking in from College Football Mafia. Nathan, what's going on today?
Not much. How you doing?
I am doing well. And you have to be in your glory here recently, because after a bit of a lull in regards to news out there, just more waiting and getting a hint here and there, we've had a few major moves here recently. I think we did discuss the ACC, of course, coming out with its 60-40 revenue distribution to try to put a Band-Aid on its relationship with Clemson and Florida State and appease those two in particular going forward. Now we've got the process of a college football playoff of 16 teams that seems all but a done deal, that will throw another team coming from the Big 12 and the ACC, but extra teams, of course, securing their spots from the Big 10 and the SEC. And I find it interesting that, and you would know this as well as anyone, that if you run the numbers and the rankings from last football season, while this is intended and pushed by the Big 10 and the SEC to help them to schedule as difficult as possible and still secure the spots,
right,
that BYU would have been the team that would have benefited last year, because, of course, the Big 12 only had one team in, number 12, Arizona State, that, of course, became a top 4 seed. But BYU was sitting in that next position. And, of course, the Big 12 needed one more team. So BYU would have benefited from that format last year.
Yeah, look, I wish we're a dollar short and a day late, right? I mean, at the end of the day, better late than never is kind of what we need to look forward to. Tons of people on social media, a lot of people upset. Why? That's not fair. 4-4, 2-2, 1. Look, at the end of the day, it is the reality and what college football is now. So you can bay at the moon and only get the one team in, or you can be part of the process and at least try to secure that second team. And then if you have a really good season, you'll get a third team in. So I think the access is better to have than to just throw it to the wolves, only have 5 guaranteed spots, the 1 G5 and the 4 in the Power 4 leagues, and then everything else is just wide open. I think it would be better to guarantee that second access. There's no guarantee on this spot, obviously. It could be the 15th seed, it could be the 12th seed, but at least they would have had that second team in, and that would have been nice to see last year.
Nathan, I'm all for meritocracy myself, and I don't agree with this safeguarding positions for conferences. I believe that if there's a committee in play, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I think that they've done a decent job. I don't have a huge issue with any of the selections of the playoff teams going back to 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have selected exactly all of the teams that have been selected? No, there's a couple nuanced selections I would have made differently, but I did not have an egregious issue with any of these selections over the course of 11 years. So if you've entrusted this committee, and of course the members change, but you've entrusted this committee and they're the ones supposed to be doing the job, then allow them to do their jobs and not force seedings and force entries into the playoff field. If the Big Ten and the SEC are clearly the best conferences, then they should be able to prove that on the field and earn those playoff spots.
I'm not for seedings. Don't get me wrong. I think it should be meritocracy. Whoever's at the top of the leaderboard at the end of the season should get that first spot. I have no problem with that at all. I think straight seeding works great. I think the first round home games work great. 16 teams is a good number. At the end of the day, what we're talking about is if you do look back at history, there would be a pretty good indicator that the ACC and the Big 12 wouldn't get those additional slots. Like, for instance, the Pac-12 never had one slot for 8 years. And so it's really hard to say how they should be justified to get all of those things reserved. Look, I like meritocracy. I'm a meritocracy guy. Being a BYU fan, you have to be. But at the end of the day, the system is slanted, and we either continue to tilt against windmills and hope that it just changes miraculously, or we try to give a little bit more of a leg up to those conferences that honestly are spending the most money to compete. If we can go 1-16 and the committee is actually a fair committee and doesn't do what it did last year with eye test and some of these other sort of throw-in terms they use to justify some of their decisions, then I'm all for it. But I haven't seen it yet, and until I do, my mind's not going to be changed.
Folks, we got back-to-back shows here at the Voice of College Football, at least featuring me. I run from this show to the Iowa show, so please check us out, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, with our buddy Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And we certainly want you to join Nathan and the crew at College Football Mafia. Nathan, when is the next time that you guys get together?
So I do a special show tomorrow night with Bob Thompson, the retired president of Fox Sports, and we're going to be talking 30,000-foot view of the ACC and where that's at. And I want to dive a little back into the media deals that are still up in the air with Mountain West Conference and the Pac-12. You got a bunch of schools in the G6 conferences that are fighting for relevancy. And those are two that just want to stay as near to the top as they can get. And Bob has a ton of insight, being a West Coast guy, being a Fox Sports guy. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. If we have time, I have a couple of questions for him on the House settlement and the roster limits, but I'm not sure I only got him for an hour, so we'll have to see how much I can get in and out of him.
Well, we'll try to get as much out of you as well, Nathan, for the next several minutes. And
Sure.
I guess we'll stay there in the ACC. I mentioned the revenue distribution share that was announced about a month to 6 weeks ago. And now we've had Clemson and Notre Dame get together for a 12-year deal to play through 2037. And obviously that's a play against the revenue distribution to say, hey, we want to grab Notre Dame every year because that's going to be a 5, 6, 8, maybe 8, 10 million viewed game, depending on how good we are. But we know it's going to be one of the highest viewed games of the ACC season, and we're going to grab that split. And then, as you well know, Florida State AD Mike Alford and Dan Radakovich, the Miami AD, came out immediately and said, yeah, we want the biggest brands to be playing. And then there was a slip from Dan Rad. I assume it was somewhat of a slip, making some kind of comment about a brand division versus a non-brand division. You know, what do you make of all of that, of possible changes in the ACC?
I think what I make of it is this is a conference that's fighting for survival, and the top brands are going to do anything they can to get a leg up. I think that it's a foregone conclusion in their minds, unless something changes, that they're probably going to be in this league for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And so they want to have every advantage that they can get while they're in there. The proposal of the brand, not the brand initiative with the money, but the brands playing and splitting up the conference. The best brands play against the best brands, and everybody else has to fight for table scraps. That came from the Miami administration, right? And they obviously have their own axe to grind for their access and where they want to end up. So, in my opinion, and I've told you this a million times, what's happening in the ACC has already happened with the Pac-12, and you don't have a unified conference like you might see in a Big Ten and a Big 12. I don't know where the SEC's at today, but where everybody's unified, they're all rowing in the same direction. You have it's a survive or be eaten type situation with the ACC, and the best brands are going to want to do anything they can to get the leg up. I would be worried if I'm in the ACC about the California schools, SMU, Wake Forest, Boston College, Syracuse, maybe even Pitt could be on that borderline. If I was them, I'd be real proactive in doing anything I can to secure their future and not just continue to be slaves to everybody else that's currently running the ACC.
We understand that number one offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell has committed to Miami. That just came down in the last few minutes.
Yep.
So, folks, we appreciate that. And that information there in the chat. Leanne Herring's going to drop by at 5:15 Eastern to discuss that and all the recruiting news. And again, Nathan, Big 12 Mafia, College Football Mafia, the place to be. And he's got a big show coming up on Wednesday night. So this house settlement, the big hang up for Judge Claudia Wilkin for a number of weeks was the cutting of athletes, basically, that there would be 5,000 athletes across all sports that would be eliminated right away with these roster limitations. And, you know, the first indication she gave of how that could be handled would be, number one, grandfathering everyone who's currently on a roster in the NCAA. Mm-hmm. And then there's a few other ways. And I know that there was some information just released yesterday that I didn't get to, but there were a few layers involved in regards to how this could be handled. One was that players that had been cut during this off season would be reinstated. There were a few things involved there. Do you find anything in particular interesting or to be a hang up with the way this is headed in regards to roster limitations?
So let's get a few things first on the table. She was never an advocate for roster limits. That came from the NCAA and the P4. The primary reason to do that is to reduce costs. They only have so much money in the settlement. There's only so much that these schools can dole out for scholarships. So the easy way to cut that off is you just say there's a roster limit for every sport. Football, the limit dropped from say 130 or 140 with walk-ons to 105 only, and all those can have scholarships if you want to provide them. So the judge didn't want any part of this, right? This isn't something that she wanted or has tried to enforce. This came from the A4 and from the NCAA trying to reduce cost, and there's other reasons why they did it. All the objectors, all the parents of students that got cut or have in the springtime lost their opportunity because the school wrote them a letter saying, sorry, the spot we were going to give you is no longer exists. We're getting rid of that program. She's not happy about that. And she told those guys to go back and basically change it. I want you guys to put it back to the way it was. Basically put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste dispenser. I said that wrong, but you get what I'm saying. He wanted to unwind that bell, and the judge said, you guys need to make this better. So they proposed back last week, hey, this is how we make it better. It'll be voluntary. The schools can bring it back if they want to. And she's shaking her head this whole time, going, no, that's not going to be enough. So where we end up, I believe on the 18th will be the next ruling. There's a bunch of objector letters that have already been put in on top of the ones that were produced over the period of about 6 weeks beforehand. And we'll have to see if she wants to slap the A4 and the NCAA around and say, sorry, this just isn't enough. We're going to put the docket for an actual court case. We're going to go to court and let's solve this thing if you guys can't resolve it in the negotiating room. And they don't want that. If there's anything that the NCAA and the A4 do not want is to go to court. So they're playing chicken with the federal judge. I've talked to a lot of lawyers, very smart people, and nobody's ever heard of that before. So this is the first time anybody's seen anything like this. And it's really weird too, because it's a civil case. It's not even like there was a legal judgment by the federal government or something. This is just one party suing another party for access and for rights to monies and everything else. Nobody's ever seen it before. So in my opinion, the smartest people I talk to, they've all said that they don't think this is going to fly the way it is. And unless there's more changes, which they could continue to make incremental changes, it's going to be tough to see where that lands in the next coming weeks and months.
We've got a members only watch party coming up next Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And that is the game that you selected. So about 300 votes in Ohio State, Michigan from 2021. So we will all enjoy that one together. That's
a good game. Yes, that's a good game. Ohio State wouldn't want to watch that game, I don't think.
No. Now, whether that game's going to stand long term, that's another consideration. But we won't get into that.
Yes.
So the roster limitations, for as fascinating as that is, I think we know where that's headed, and there might be a little bit of nuance to it. What is going to fascinate me, this is the most interesting part of all this to me, is the $20.5 million that is going to be allocated to each individual athletics department, folks. Mm-hmm. So this is not just football, but number one question for me will be, how is each school going to divide that amongst its athletic programs? Are they going to strictly go merit-based and football gets 93% of the TV revenue for us out of this, so they're going to get 93, or however they're going to deal with that, the individual schools, number one. Number two, and even more fascinating to me, is how in the world do you distribute, let's say, $18 million to a college football roster and make that fair and make that so it doesn't become damaging to your locker room?
Boy, these are great questions, Mark. I don't know that I have the answers for them. I think it is fascinating. At the end of the day, I think we're going to see this over time, that the money's going to be doled out by the percentage of the responsibility that particular sport has at a school. Ohio State, most of the money is going to go to football. North Carolina, it might be 50-50 because they want more of that money to go to basketball. And so who has to make up the difference? The amounts are going to be in the tens of millions of dollars for a football program. That can't all come from the settlement. Then it's going to have to be made up by third-party NIL. And I'll just speak for one I do know about, and that's BYU, right? They're spending a ton of money in NIL in both basketball and football. And I guarantee you that amount of money is going to follow success. So in 2 years, if BYU just goes on a terrible run again and wins 3 games and doesn't make the tournament 2 years in a row for basketball, you're going to see a natural retraction of that NIL money. If they win, they're going to get a bunch more of it. So each school is going to have to make up its own mind. How much do they have to subsidize to get their program off the ground and running, versus how much they have to invest in perpetuity to keep the program viable. I think that's going to be an amazing stat. What was it? Ohio State said they could put $35 million into their football program to win a national championship. That all can't come from that $20.5 million. So that means a lot of that money's come from third-party NIL and from corporations saying we want to win football games. And so each program is going to be able to make up their mind on that. And that's where the merit comes in my opinion, with NIL and everything else. If your program wants to succeed, put the money into your program. Get your people that have boosters to get the best players you can. And the schools that can't do that, they're naturally going to fall backwards. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Doreen, thank you so much for your membership here at the Voice of College Football and your support. Mark, keep growing this platform. Go Bucks. Indeed. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Got Nathan Brown here, College Football Mafia. He's got a big show with Bob Thompson, who's former, what is his exact title?
President of Fox Sports and the creator of the Big Ten Network. So somebody who knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. So that's a must-watch right there, folks. College Football Mafia with Nathan on Wednesday night with Bob Thompson. So, yeah, I'm almost tempted to take a college football roster, whomever it might be, and try to determine how would I approach this and what do I think I could get away with in distributing this money to this roster, and how much of it would be just based on let's let the valuations let's be very generic with our evaluations and let the NIL supplement the best players. That's where the differentiation should come from. Or would I try to say, you know what, our right guard's better than our left guard. We're going to give him, 50,000 more.
Right.
Boy, that's a tricky business.
You know what's ironic is the one thing that college football would absolutely benefit from tomorrow is players to have a CBA and for them to have the rights to negotiate what a salary cap could be. Everybody is screaming. All these employer lawyers are advocating. Darren Heitner is a good example, out there every day, really pushing to represent his athletes to get the most money possible. And he's the one who's saying, yeah, we need a CBA. We need our rights and privileges of these athletes to be protected. If they did that, it naturally would bring back the astronomical sums that are currently going to, like the quarterback of Winston, Michigan, $12 million. I mean, that's a crazy number for a guy that hasn't played an ounce of college football. How does that get reined in? College, I'm telling you, the NCAA and the A4, all they'd have to do is finally give in, say, okay, we're going to treat you as employees. The minute you do that, you get representation in a union, something like that. And at the same time, as an organization, we can begin to institute things like salary caps. You could institute things like the left tackle might get more than the right tackle. All of those things could be absolutely negotiated and put in place, and it will benefit the great majority of football players. Basketball is a little different because there's only 13 of them or whatever. But for football specifically, when you have a third string right tackle that can also play third string right guard, if they're going to be pegged to make a certain amount of money, the easiest way to do that is you negotiate it. So just give in. Just give in and give them representation, treat them like employees, give them health benefits, ongoing care, things like this that they don't want to commit to today. But it will, in the end, at the very top, it will moderate and bring those salaries down. And what it'll do for the ones that are at the very bottom, the triple backup punter is going to make a little bit more money because it'll be more pushed to the middle. So, in my opinion, that would be the fix.
Wonder how much of a hit that 20.5 million would take if you include health benefits, because that's pretty substantial, especially when you talk about the health risks playing football.
Right. No, I mean, that needs to be negotiated. But we both know that Fox and ESPN are not running a poorhouse. There is all kinds of money out there. It just needs to be negotiated into a deal. And in my opinion, the money is out there to be had, and more of it needs to go to support the athletes, and less needs to be going to just a general scholarship fund of a school. I think there's other ways you can spend that money and really benefit the players long term.
So I'm curious, Nathan, as soon as any situation comes up, and it's more and more these days where the competition on the field and the race for money and the arms race and everything that goes into big time competition clashes with the tradition of academics.
Yeah.
And for some schools like yours, other motivations, other incentives, other priorities, whether we're
Right.
talking the military academies with, of course, the obvious, or we're talking a religious affiliation.
Yeah.
So does BYU address this differently than other schools because of their priorities?
Well, I can already say yes. They've come out and actually put out statements saying BYU's more than likely never going to be the top bidder for any one particular athlete. They're on record as saying that. Clark C. Gilbert said that. He's the president of the university, so I think I can quote him and basically saying we don't want to be known for money. We want to be known for excellence in education and on the playing field. The problem with that is that third party NIL is not part of the school. So it's one thing for the president of the university to come out and make a statement like that, but that doesn't mean it's going to control the boosters and how much money they're willing to submit to keep their operations going. Really for fantastic athletes, you're going to get the richest of the rich that are going to write a check and say, I want that guy, even if it's for a year, because this is where I see the growth. Either we want to win now, you're one player away from winning now, or maybe you're building a longer legacy program, and to do that, you have to invest money over a longer period of time. So I think each school has to go by their North Star, make their own decisions. But at the end of the day, third-party NIL is not controlled by the schools. They certainly have relationships. Their booster of one is usually a booster of another, but that doesn't mean there's any amount of control put in.
You bring up a point, Nathan, that I talk about all the time, because it seems like the average college football fan had issue when the players weren't making anything, and we'll wink at that because a few of them were, some of them, but it was a low percentage. They basically weren't making money. Yes. And now they have an issue because they're making too much money. So people
why
have their
is
barometer,
that?
but it's usually based on how much money they make as opposed to, how much.
So let me ask you a question. Why does that matter? If you're Joe Blow, you have box seats on the 35-yard line, and they're legacy seats. They've been in your family for 30 years. Why do you care how much your school, let's say Ohio State, pays to have that player show up? I want the best team on the field. I could care less how much they cost, right? Because the money is already being put out to improve seating, to improve facilities. Money's already going to those things. So if you're just doing it just to spite your team, or you're doing it to spite another team because you're jealous and you don't have the boosters to back that up, that's a you problem in my mind. It has nothing to do with the school or the athletes. I want my athletes to make all the most money. It doesn't hurt me in the least. Just like I want the Seahawks to have the best contract deals they can for their best players. I don't care how much they cost. That money doesn't come out of my pocket.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because you touched on something with how a large portion of the NIL cannot be controlled, because you can't control how much money people approach me all the time, call in here and so forth, and they want a cap placed on all of this. There needs to be a cap. Well, there's a cap in the NFL because that's income. There's not a cap placed on these players in the NFL going out and making endorsement deals.
That's right. It's only part of the CBA. It's
they can make as much money as they want.
That's right.
That's America. If the marketplace drives it, then yes, we can put a cap on college football in the same way in regards to the revenue that's coming in, because that can be all placed under a business to say, well, X percentage should be targeted for operations, and X percentage for administration, and X percentage for the player income and salaries. But, if some millionaire tycoon wants to come out, and even if BYU takes this stance and he wants to pay the number one player in America $30 million to come play at BYU.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Hey, look, if it's legal at BYU, that's all that BYU's needed. You're a history of college football guy. I know you respect where these programs have come and where some go up and some come down. The only thing that stopped BYU from being, I'm talking as near a blue blood as you could help, is money and access. They were never part of a big conference. By geography is what really drove that. And money was, quote unquote, illegal, even though you and I both know bagmen were given money to, for instance, SMU and brand new Corvettes and all these other things. BYU generally avoided those things because of the appearance of impropriety. Now all those checks are off. They're part of a power league, and money is now legal. So anybody else that's complaining over the fact that BYU went from here to here, if they actually knew what the history of BYU football or BYU sports were, they would see, oh, okay, now it makes total sense. You have, a fairly well-off membership to a church that goes out and gets educations and starts companies and has all kinds of revenue. They want to turn around and give money directly to the players. They couldn't do that before. Now they can. Now they have a top 5, basketball roster this year, and probably next 2 years, the football team would be somewhere at least in the 30s, if not the 20s.
Nathan Brown, College Football Mafia. And before we let you go, Nathan, we got a super chat coming in here from Mr.
Sweet.
No, it's My Rhino, who says if 16-team playoff would not make sense for the Big 12 and the ACC merge, creating a third league with 4 guaranteed spots for the new conference, just like the Big 10 and the SEC.
No, My Rhino. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you being here and showing up for Mark's show. The Big 12, if they were to merge with the ACC, would water down the product to a point where now they're actually going to lose money in the media evaluation. There's a reason the ACC and the Big 12 didn't merge 2 years ago. It wasn't because they don't see efficiencies in scale and throwing 24 or 36 teams in one conference. There's ways to get around some of those scheduling difficulties and things, but the big problem is that pretty much every school in the Big 12 is worth about the same amount of money. That's not the case in the ACC. You take out the top 4 or 5 brands in the ACC, and the bottom of the rest are way, way low. And it would be completely disproportionate. So if you're a ACC fan, I apologize. I'm not trying to make you upset, but that's the biggest reason is a lot of those brands the Big 12 simply doesn't want.
Yeah, I basically took that ACC 60-40 formula, and I took the last 2 football seasons, and I directly took the math from the TV ratings and the percentages of viewers and took it to the finances. Now, I don't know if that's exactly I'm sure it's not exactly, but I did run it by some knowledgeable people that are closer to the situation than me, and they said, yeah, you did a pretty reasonable estimation, and it widens out. Now, would the same thing, minus the Colorado Dion phenom, that outlier of a situation over the last 2 seasons, you would not see that large of a discrepancy. Yeah, Oklahoma State's popular. Kansas State's been really good, and they're slightly, ever so slightly. You would see a much compressed, more balanced distribution in the Big 12, but the ACC's got Clemson and Florida State, and then it cascades from there. Yeah. Miami's there, Louisville to an extent, but yeah, much different situation.
And there's a reason for that. The way they constructed the ACC was 15 years ago, we want to be the best basketball conference in America. So there was only 4 or 5 brands that put money into football. And that went for well over a decade. Come to find out, the bad guy shows up and says, okay, I'm here to collect. And the ACC is looking around going, well, we don't have any money for you. All our money went to basketball. Oh, you missed the bus. The bus was TV for football. That's what the bus is long gone. They're down the road in a different city. It's almost too late for you to play catch up now. So that's the biggest difference is the Big 12 didn't do that. The Big 12 grew its basketball holistically and is doing a pretty good job at it. And they have schools that generally aren't in debt. In fact, except for the four corner schools that came from the Pac-12, the Big 12 schools are pretty solvent. They're not making $1 billion, but they're not losing a bunch of money either. And yet the Pac-12 was run into the ground, and you know how you know that? Because the 4 schools that came into the Big 12 are all upside down in their finances. Arizona State, for one example, $51.7 million. Their legislature had to subsidize the athletic department at the Arizona State University. You're not seeing that in any other school in the Big 12. And all 4 of the schools that came in from the Pac-12 were way in debt. because, again, a different show, but because of the way that Scott ran that conference, he hedged and said, we're going to get our money back way down the road. So go ahead and deficit spend now. So there's pure economics to this. It's not just Nathan doesn't like the ACC. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with for your conference to be viable. Once the top brands leave the ACC, there's only a few brands that are really able to carry the water, and those are the ones that are going to get picked up in other leagues.
Nathan Brown doing a heck of a job for us here at the Voice of College Football. Catch Nathan on a regular basis, of course, at College Football Mafia. It's right here on YouTube, and they get together on Wednesday nights. He's got Bob Thompson, former CBS Sports exec and founder of the Big Ten Network. Man, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Bob's a stud. He is the smartest guy I know of when it comes to the finances, the realignment, the house settlement, all those things all together. He's the smartest guy in the room, in my opinion.
Well, you're up there too, Nathan. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation. It's good to see you.
Of course. Good to see you, Nathan. Have a good week.
Okay. All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Our guy, Nathan Brown, again, College Football Mafia. Let's keep it rolling. We're going to stay with the same shade of blue. How about that? The big blue wall of Kentucky. The proud Kentuckians there. And we got Kevin McGuffey, of course, last word on college football. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing good, Mark. Great to be on with you again, as always, and looking forward to talking to you about some stuff.
So. Absolutely. Let's do that. And I went searching around for some Kentucky football talk, and I came up with this. Season ticket sales are down. They just announced this in the last couple of days. They're down like 2,500 from where they were last year, and it's the lowest number they've had in 4 years. So 4-8 obviously didn't help that.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. That was something that was posted, I think, in the local paper either today or yesterday. I think it's about somewhere around 12 to 13% that ticket sales are down from last year. A lot of different things you can take into that. I think obviously 4-8 last season hasn't helped. I think there's a little, I don't know. I don't want to say, the program obviously doesn't have the excitement that it had, say, 3 years ago. But Stoops is, to his credit, he says, "Look, I know we made some mistakes, and I'm motivated and I'm ready to go this year, and you're going to see a much better product on the field." But I think the fans are kind of taking a wait and see approach, which, and of course, another thing, ticket prices. As we all know, you can sit at home in your 70-inch TV and watch any number of games, as many games as you want to, just about on an afternoon, as opposed to going to the stadium and fighting traffic, fighting all the food prices and everything else. So like I said, I think it's just a little bit the Kentucky. It's just kind of a wait and see. We'll see what happens. But I'm a little surprised that the season tickets, if for no other reason than Kentucky has one of the best home schedules ever this year. I mean, last year's was really good as well. But you think about, they've got Texas coming in this year. They got Ole Miss coming in this year. I believe Florida and Tennessee. So some rivalry games, and then a school who's never played Kentucky in Kentucky, which would be Texas. They only met twice, and both times were in Texas. And then Ole Miss, Kentucky upset Ole Miss down there last year. Obviously, that was the highlight of the 2024 season. So Ole Miss probably going to be looking for some revenge coming back in this year. But yeah, I'm not surprised that the ticket sales are down. I'm surprised maybe it's a little more than what I thought it would be. But again, we're only in the middle of May right now, so we still got 3.5 months before the season kicks off against Toledo. So there's still time for everybody to get out there and get their tickets.
Joe Long is thinking that maybe Trump put a tariff on the Kentucky tickets.
I'm staying. I'm staying politics free on that one, but that's funny. We'll just leave it at that. So
we'll leave it at that.
But
You got a quarterback in Zach Calzada that
Right.
a lot of us lost track of because it seemed like he just left college football. Well, he was at Auburn, of course, after
right,
he was at Texas A&M, and of course, his crowning achievement was an upset of number
that
one
upset of
Alabama in 2021. That was a long time ago, but he was at Incarnate Word, and he's the Kentucky starting quarterback this year. We just had Brad Crawford on from 247
Mhm.
Sports, and he ranked him the worst quarterback in the SEC. So, uh, is there some hope that Zach Calzada is going to be better than what the position was last year?
I think so. As you can clearly see behind me, the TV station I work for, we're the official UK station here in Lexington. And shortly after Calzada signed back in December, we did an interview with him, and of course, he said and did all the right things. And the coaching staff has talked about how I thought he looked pretty good in the spring. As you said, he's kind of been everywhere. Started at A&M. They just said that Alabama game, went to Auburn, got injured, never played, and then kind of dropped off. Went to Incarnate Word, same school, of course, that Cam Ward came from. Now, are we expecting the same results that with Calzada that we did with Ward? Now, it would be pretty awesome if it happened, but a lot of that, I think, with Calzada, and I think the thing that you and I have talked about has been the biggest hindrance, I think, to UK in the last couple of years has been the offensive line. You go back, Will Levis, his last year here, Devin Leary, and then last year, your quarterbacks seem to be constantly running for their, with Vandergriff, he retired from football basically. Now you don't want to correlate one to the other, but I think in the spring, I think Calzada looked pretty good. The media, we didn't get to see a whole lot of spring football, other than there was like a couple of open practices, and then of course they had the then they had it wasn't a spring game, it's basically a controlled scrimmage. There's a lot of people that have that opinion. I don't know that Stoops has played out, but I think if Kentucky has another subpar season, then there'll definitely be some heat on him. UK's athletic director Mitch Barnhart called last season basically a 1-year blip on what's been a really good career that Stoops has had here. A lot of people didn't take that the way they should have, or think a lot of people think that the program has been on a little bit of a decline over the last 3 years, not just, and then it kind of tanked last year. But with the schedule they have this year, it's hard to look at it and see, maybe a path to 6 wins, but they're going to have to pull a couple upsets with that schedule that they have this year for sure.
Got Kevin McGuffey here from Last Word on College Football, and once the season gets going, Kevin does about as good a job as anybody anywhere in projecting these crazy bowl scenarios. So that's always a fun project. So you'll want to track Kevin's work there on the bowl projections. Right,
and I was going to say you just had Brad Crawford on earlier. He's kind of one of the OGs, I guess, with the the bowl projections, doing the things for 247 Sports. And please, everyone, when I'll probably have somewhere around mid-June, we'll have a just for fun, let's throw this out here. Don't put any money on it yet. Who in the preseason, who we might have in the bowls. And then once we get into the season, we'll have them updated every week up until the final projections. But yeah, no, I've done pretty well the last couple of years. So hopefully, knock on wood here, that will continue. Now the question is, at this point, I don't know that I have Kentucky making a bowl game right now, but again, this is only mid-May, so a lot can happen, and we know. College football, things can turn quickly from one year to the next. A team can be down the year before, and then all of a sudden, get hot and see, a lot of interesting things can happen. But yes, please go over Last Word on College Football. Check us out. There's a lot of great content there. 20 some, I think, teams that we cover, and like I said, we have bowl projections. We also do, to my knowledge, we're the only site that I know that does a weekly. All the writers do a weekly Heisman poll too, throughout we do throughout the season that gets posted in the middle of each week. So there may be other sites that do it, but that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Just throwing out the, some of the many things you can check out when we get into the season.
I see here, Kevin, that Kentucky did nab the number one player in the state, offensive tackle Jarius Strickland. So they got him for 2026, but he's the only commit. They are going to have a recruiting class, right, for 2026?
Yes, yeah, they are. It's just a little. They're getting a late start for whatever reason. I know a lot of schools are ahead of the curve, but yeah, they've got. It's going to take a little time, I guess, and we'll see what happens. But that's one thing that Stoops and his staff, Vince Marrow and his staff, have done very well is keep the top players in Kentucky at home, and they're doing that again this year. And like I said, they have a number of offers. They've got players coming in for visits, so hopefully this will be something. The next time we talk, we can talk about more than more than one player. So, like I said, he comes from Paducah-Tillman. It's one of the Kentucky traditional powers, and the Cats have picked up a couple players from Paducah-Tillman in the couple of recruiting classes. So, yeah, like I said, they got nowhere to go but up. It is one recruit. They're rated 16th out of 16 in the 247 ratings. So. But yeah, like I said, they've got a number of players they're hosting for visits, and hopefully, once we get into the summer, we'll start hearing more and more about players coming in for 2026. So, it seems, but that's kind of where we are now in these days. We're haven't even started the 2025 season, but we're already looking at 2026 and even 2027. I think I've seen some players at schools who have come in and committed. Not necessarily to Kentucky, but places around the country. So it's kind of it's a year-round, never-ending thing, isn't it?
No doubt about that. I should have probably brought this up when I brought up Zach Calzada, but with Barian Brown and Dane Key gone, who's going to catch the ball for the Cats this year?
Well, they got a good Jamori Macklin. They got a big plus when he decided to come back. He looked at one point at possibly going to the NFL. Then Fred Ferrier, they got a guy who played some last year. The wide receiver thing, I kind of thought they would go a little harder in the transfer portal. They got Hardley Gilmore back. He left, transferred to Nebraska, and some things happened out there, but and now he's back in Kentucky. The big thing, I don't know if you followed the story, but True Edwards from Louisiana Tech, he was going to be that big guy, that wide receiver one that Kentucky was looking for. He transferred from Louisiana Tech. There was some issues with eligibility. I'm not sure that he ever got on campus. And then we come to find during the NFL draft that he signed a free agent deal with the LA Rams. So that pretty much took care of that. But one guy that I'm very excited about that I think can do some big things for Kentucky is Kendrick Law. He's a Alabama transfer at the wide receiver position. I think he's a guy you can definitely watch out for. And then they also got Troy Stellato, who played previously at Clemson. I think those two guys, I think those could probably, with Ferrier and with Macklin, those are probably going to be Calzada's, favorite targets, I believe. So, and they were working on getting that rapport in the spring, and hopefully it can only get better as we head into the fall. So, but yeah, I was a little surprised. They picked up a couple other guys, Ashton Cozart from SMU, some guys that are kind of under the radar. So, Kentucky's had has had good luck with bringing in lesser known players and making making stars out of them. So hopefully that can happen here too. But I was a little surprised that they didn't go a little harder after some more wide receiver targets. But it is what it is. And like I said, I think with those 4 guys, I think it's definitely a good start at the receiver position.
All right. Always a good time checking in on Big Blue with Kevin McGuffey. Check out Kevin's work there. Last Word on College Football. Kevin, good to see you. Hope
Sure.
your spring and on into the summer's off to a good start, and we'll catch you soon.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you for having me on, and look forward to being on with you again sometime soon. So thank you very much.
All right, folks. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We have had a jam-packed session here. Brad Crawford, 247 Sports, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football, Nathan Brown from College Football Mafia, and we're going to keep it rolling because Miami is the choice, everyone. Miami it is, and we got Leanne Herring on the line, dropping by to break down the commitment from one Jackson Cantwell. We've been talking about this, Leanne, for a long, long time, and he finally let us know. Great to see you.
Well,
Thanks for dropping by.
Always great to see you. I was catching that, Big Blue Nation lineup. Always good to have, him on with a good breakdown. A lot to be excited, hopefully, about for Kentucky football this offseason. But man, talk about, I think it was only fitting that we have called this segment the Recruiting Coup, because talk about the coup that Mario Cristobal and Miami just pulled for the #1 overall, not only offensive tackle, but the #1 overall guy. As you guys know, if you listened in yesterday, I was very set on Georgia. But again, in the recruiting world, we know in a big recruitment such as this one, especially for an offensive lineman with this kind of caliber talent, not just on the football field, but we also talked about on the track field in Jackson Cantwell, that it was going to go down to the wire. And indeed, it really went down to the wire. Late into last night, we started hearing, of course, those rumblings. Some sources I started talking to close to the camp, that Miami was still coming in. Like I said, Georgia was the one from the jump, but Miami really never let the gas off or put the brakes on this one. They kept pushing it hard. And we knew that this was a recruitment that not only was going to have to do with NIL. I mean, sources were hearing us, close to the camp overall, early on, when we knew that NIL was going to play obviously a big factor in this. Not to solely completely, but from Jackson Cantwell's agency, we heard that if you didn't have 2 million, don't even bother calling, don't even bother making an offer. And Miami had no problem in putting that down early on. But we're hearing that this deal could have very well ended with Miami putting that $2.5 million. This is not over a couple seasons, ladies and gentlemen. This is just for his freshman season. So again, Miami, Mario Cristobal winning big, gaining that #1 offensive tackle in the country, #1 overall player. And again, as much as not NIL did play a factor in this, we got to watch Jackson Cantwell's commitment. Very, very, very to the point, very brief, very humble kid, probably one of the most well-spoken kids in his class, coming from a small town in Missouri with big dreams. We know that a lot has been shined around about his talent. Obviously, we talked about yesterday, Mark, that he's got that DNA inbred in him. Obviously, being the product, there's not one, but 2 Olympian parents. But this is a kid, who really has just really come into his own and really made waves. We broke him down a little bit. But I think, too, another key factor in here is that Miami is looking for a place, and everybody's all in it. Miami, investments, investors. But I think another big thing that we haven't really talked about, that Georgia did provide on some level, but I really think here that Alex Mirabal, the offensive line coach over there at Miami, has really just been a signature staple in what he can do as the phrase goes, developing guys that are 3 and done. And I think that was also played a huge factor in Jackson Cantwell ultimately committing to Miami. So again, with this commitment, with one of the top 5 stars off the board, we broke him down yesterday. Extremely physical. We know that he has that shot put discus background, which also gives him that lightning quick speed on the power. This is a guy that no matter where they put him, he's going to be a force. So again, Jackson Cantwell is officially going to be a Cane. Does that mean that the recruitment's not going to stop? But this is one of those recruitment marks, despite me always saying it's a long way till December. I feel like they've been with him for the stretch and what they're going to provide for the NIL. And I really think this development and what Miami is doing, as far as being able to develop this particular position is going to speak volumes. And I think Cantwell stays put until December, and I think he will finish out being a Cane. But again, with this being said, this means that where does Georgia stand? Where does Oregon stand? Because there's plenty of guys on the board. While Georgia, of course, this was going to hit hard for them, losing a top offensive lineman prospect. Believe me, they are in no bad position, especially heading to this weekend. Big recruiting weekend down in Athens. Of course, we know that the scavenger hunt is one of the big annual recruitings, not only for the football team down there, but for the basketball team. So a lot of dogs in play. One guy that we're definitely going to be looking for that's going to be down there this weekend is another offensive lineman, Darius Gray. I believe now with the dominoes falling with Cantwell committing to Miami, that it's going to leave a lot of room for deals to be made, not only on the NIL side, but a lot of free space to open up to go over some high power recruits. So just because Georgia and Oregon ultimately lost out in this one, both guys are setting themselves up position, especially Oregon. Georgia could possibly land not one, but two of the top offensive 5-star guys, on the board. So big hour setting back. But again, a lot of things in motion. We already broke down Cantwell, but again, like I said, Darius Gray setting to head over to the scavenger hunt this weekend. Let's see what pieces and he puts together. He possibly could very well be a Georgia Bulldog, but again, Georgia is still in very good shape despite not getting this commitment. Like I said, some of the names that definitely look for. I think On Three has him as the number 6 recruiting class, so definitely still in good shape. Of course, we know they got a big win on that defensive side with Jordan Smith, the Houston County commit. Of course, they may have not added Jackson Cantwell, but they have Jared Curtis and some of the guys. There's plenty of movement and still motion. They're looking to capitalize on this weekend. As far as getting as far as getting 5 stars, again, Kirby Smart is in good place. Some of the names to watch for this weekend at Scavenger Hunt, of course, a lot of 5 stars. They're going after the number one linebacker, top rated linebacker, and Tyler Atkinson. Of course, number 1 running back, Savion Hitler. Brandon Arrington, another top cornerback, the number 2 receiver, Cedric Morgan, are some guys, a couple flips brewing. Of course, we know Xavier Griffin, one of the number 2 linebacker in the country right now, Mark, is heavily committed to USC. But again, we are in the heart of OV season. So Georgia looking to make a big flip this weekend and trying to get in the graces of Xavier Griffin. Of course, they may have not won the number 1 offensive lineman in the country, but they still, like I said, have the number 1 offensive interior lineman in Darius Gray heading down that way, that they definitely will undoubtedly be hyping up his recruitment. Again, Darius Gray, interior lineman, but could very easily be moved across that line. Some other guys to look at, of course, Xavier Cromwell out of Jackson, number 2 running back in the country. Again, another running back that I think that they're going to have to be yet in another battle with Miami is, of course, the number 3 running back in Derek Cooper. Derek Cooper's recruitment has got very heated, very up to the wire. They're going to be battling Miami. We also know that he's, of course, out of Charmaine Madonna down there in Florida. So again, Miami looking to battle again. But as far as, of course, this is a hard hit for Kirby Smart, but heading into scavenger hunt weekend with just some of the names that I listed, we're talking about not just number 1 offensive guys, but a lot of number 1 guys across the board. Kirby Smart looking to capitalize, continue to fill that depth chart. So it's a hard hit for the Oregon Ducks. It's a hard hit for Georgia in not getting the number 1 guy, but again, they are still in pretty good shape. And with these things, Mark, like I said, there's still plenty of top guys off the board. So where do we have left as far as offensive linemen go in this 2026 class? Well, Oregon and Georgia definitely have their picks, and I think the 2 guys that come to mind first off has to be Georgetown Prep, Maryland standout, Emmanuel Inacho. This is a kid who is just truly remarkable when you look at him. Colossal offensive lineman, 6'7", 350 pounds, has some of the longest arms probably in this 2026 class, Mark. He just has an unexpected burst when it comes to his lower body movement, explosiveness that really defies his size. This is another kid that I really like about him, and I think that's why he's become so versatile. While he's could be used on any position on that line. And I think his potential to transition from the interior offensive lineman, from the right side to the interior offensive lineman, also makes him one of those guys that's just very, very marketable. Again, like I said, extremely enormous in his reach, has exceptional hand power. Like I said, he's a challenge when you have to go up with him against the trenches. So for me, I think with the dominoes falling, with Oregon losing out in this one, I really do believe that it's going to set the tone for Oregon. They've already been recruiting him hard, but I really like now with Cantwell making this move to Miami. I really like where it sets the picture and sets the tone for Oregon and Dan Lanning to land Emmanuel Iheanacho. Of course, there's some other schools that are lurking, LSU, Penn State, but I really think now that as the dominoes have started to fall as far as the top elite offensive tackles, that this really sets the tone for Oregon to really be able to go out there and get the kill. He's been there several times. The relationship seems to constantly getting stronger. And I think now with this commitment, that this will only allow him to have a little bit more confidence. That this is a kid, like I said, that where he stands, he still has some areas of growth. But I think, again, this is a kid with a lot of already NFL potential at such a young, early age. So I think now with this dominoes falling, that the next 5-star plus OT is really set in line and sets himself for Oregon.
I never cared much for Wednesdays, but you now, like me, everyone, can look forward to Wednesday night with Leanne and myself, talking college football, talking recruiting, talking the transfer portal. We're on the move every Wednesday night, 8:30 Eastern, right here. And Leanne is going to continue to join us on a regular basis for the Crute and Coup. And that will be just about every day.
Yeah, we'll be here every day. Tomorrow we might have a little bit of a change, or but we'll be here on the show, of course, just breaking it down. Like I said, as the dominoes start to fall, we're in the heart of official visit season. So make sure you guys tune into our late night show. And then of course, every day we'll have the Crute and Coup with the latest rumblings. But again, Miami staged one heck of a coup today in being able to down to the wire, where not just NIL but development did matter, relationships matter. But when it was all said and done, that Miami cap may have not fit Jackson Cantwell today when he did that infamous put his cap on today on his recruiting announcement. But man, talk about a big win, a big fit. And I think for Miami now that it's really going to give them some steam as far as the recruiting trail, landing this top talent, because again, it's setting a lot in motion, because I think now we realize that Miami is willing. We've seen a lot of other programs with hefty bankrolls, as I like to call them, as far as NIL, still have that reservation and hesitation when it comes to building a class solely on top high school elite talent. Mario Cristobal and company have definitely shown they are not afraid to run towards that fire, and the boosters are definitely making that call to arms, investing. And I think that now we're going to see a lot of recruitments heating up. Like I said, I expect now that recruitment between Georgia and Miami to continue with running back Derek Cooper heading into this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see where Derek Cooper, if he in fact still makes a visit down to Georgia, and if who others are going to be in the mix, or he ends up at Miami. But again, Jackson, Cantwell, Miami are going to be hand in hand, and it's going to be a hot recruiting season down in South Florida for Cristobal and the Canes, no doubt.
Leanne is the director of recruiting for the Rebel Walk, also writing for Cat's Wire. And of course, we've got her here at the Voice of College Football, but the easiest way to track all of her work is just follow her on Twitter/X, Leanne Herring RW. And again, we get together on Wednesday nights, and we're going to take your calls on Wednesday nights. So get ready, get your questions set and your comments, and give us a call Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central. Leanne, thanks for making the time for us.
Always good to be here. And if you want more on that Jackson Cantwell breakdown and some other great breakdowns and commitments, don't forget to head over to our new Voice of College Football website. A lot of writers doing a lot of good breakdowns. And so make sure you head over and check us out and catch us on the move tomorrow night. And make sure to drop in your calls for all the latest on recruiting. We will see you tomorrow night.
See you soon. All right. Leanne saving us once again from having to do a Jackson Cantwell breakdown myself. No, we leave that up to Leanne. She's all over the recruiting landscape across college football. And again, this is a huge one. Jackson Cantwell, you heard it, and I see the comments in the chat, $2 million. And I know money's not worth what it used to be, but $2 million is still, it's $2 million. Yes, it's pretty good for a 17-year-old. Pretty good. Jackson, thanks for being here, man. What do you have for us? To-do list. Tell Paul about Leanne Herring. Okay. Remember, Jackson, I'm still number one, though. I'm still number one on the list. Okay. But yes, absolutely. We can get Leanne on the Feinbaum show as well. And it may be my one and only appearance, but he'd probably have Leanne come back again and again and again and again. I do appreciate everyone being here. Minnie, thank you for your contributions as always. Jackson leading us into our Iowa show. We're getting together with Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm in just a matter of minutes. What do we got? 5:28. I'm doing 2 minutes on the Iowa channel. So if you're just joining us here in the last few minutes, keep in mind that we had 4 excellent guests. So you can always just rewind the video, take it to the beginning. Brad Crawford, 247 Sports, Nathan Brown from College Football Mafia, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football, and of course, Leanne just joined us as well here at the Voice of College Football. And Leanne also let everyone know that we've got a new website. And please lock in there. You'll catch some great stuff. What do we have here as the latest? Our general managers, the new norm in college football. We've got Oregon lands the blue chip edge rusher in Richard Wesley, and a whole lot more right there at vocfb.com. You can join one of the forums and talk trash with rival fan bases, of course. Catch us on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, Amazon, and Apple. Everything that you see here live, you can also catch on audio as well, right here at the Voice of College Football. I'm going to turn this around in like 1 minute. We'll see you on the Iowa show with Corey Brada right now.